Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy. Thanks for tuning in today. You'll be happy you did because look behind me, that's a 1972 Chevrolet Nova with LS power. And it's come to me today because apparently it has a noise coming from the rear differential, and I guess due to my recent experiences, I'm now an expert. It also has some small leaks back there. Now, in preparation for this, my friend John, who owns this car, has brought me a new set of gears, 411 gears, for the 12-bolt rear end, which is what's back there. He's also brought me some gaskets, some oil, a new differential cover, and pinion bearing set, which I will need to change over the gear set if that's necessary. Anyway, starts with a test drive to verify the customer complaint. Let's go for a ride. I don't know how we can hear much. Ooh. I can say that it's more of a rumbly, grindy kind of thing. I mean, it's hard to hear over this exhaust, and the steering is questionable with these pizza cutters. But it's more like messed up than a noise. It's like grumbly, grindy, and it's on coast. It's not on acceleration so much. Oh, there's the howl. There it is. And yes, I am wearing a seatbelt. All this car has is lap belts. I now have the Nova up on the lift. I'm going to first do a nice visual inspection and just sort of feel things around the differential to see if I can find anything that sticks out. Then I'm going to run it while it's up on the lift with the wheels off the ground and see if I can hear that noise here in the shop with it just sitting on the lift. All right, I've got the car part way up. It might be just these wheels and tires, but I just didn't have a whole lot of confidence while I was driving it. I mean, you get a car with this kind of power output, you want it to be solid. Same thing here in the back. It almost looks like these tires have kissed the inside of this fender well a little bit. That's normal. Should have put it in neutral. Well, nothing really out of the ordinary there. No doubt about it, it is leaking, and it looks like attempts have been made to seal up those leaks. In fact, there's evidence here on the fuel tank. He also mentioned that one of these supports up here, the support on the inside was broken. That's the reason why I have a new one of these covers. Last time he brought it in, there was some play here up front. I'm not feeling any. Let's run it up in the air and see if we can hear anything abnormal. Hard to hear anything with this exhaust. I'm gonna get my stethoscope and get a listen. I think it's time to take it apart. I'm gonna start by draining the fluid. Why does that look like it's got water in it? Doesn't look like there's a cap on the breather. Maybe that's why. I've looked it up and this is the breather. So I'm gonna have to remove what's there and find a new breather. If you block off the breather, then the pressure can't escape from inside the housing, so you will have leaks. And guess what? We got lots of leaks on this differential, so that may solve one of the problems. Now let's get this differential cover off, which I believe has the same 1/4 inch fasteners. This is aftermarket stuff, so whatever you have on your vehicle, I'm not exactly sure what they are stock, but anyway, taking the cover off next. There's a difference between the GM 12-bolt car axle and the truck axle. So I do believe they're not interchangeable. So if you have a 12-bolt in a car, it needs to be a car. And I think you can almost see the difference because the car has this weird shape back here, and then the truck has a different shape to the diff cover. I think that's one of the ways you can differentiate the two. So both have 12 bolts, but they're different shapes and they do not interchange. Now normally what I would do is I would leave like a bolt or two up in the top of the cover, but I can clearly see that this one's glued on and it's not going anywhere. Here's a closer look. Okay, I just saw it. Did you see it? It's right there. What might give it away is the shims. The caps are on backwards, but you can kind of see how it's flat on this one side. The flat should face inside. This whole thing should be spun around the other way. And here's that broken piece he was talking about. It's supposed to have a support on it like this one, but this one seems to be broken. That's no good. I just need to keep it out of the way. Because this fell off, I'm just going to set it to the side so that it doesn't fall and anything falls out. But I already went through and looked on the inside and made sure all the needle bearings were still in there. Maybe a little bit of an axle seal leak. Looks like something got stuck behind the drum on this side. Should look like that. Let's get these axles out. Once you got that center pin out, just push the axles in and you can have access to the C-clip. That's what we're after. I don't need to pull the axle out all the way, just out of the differential. It can just rest there. I really have never had this much trouble. Let's try a bigger magnet. Well, it's supposed to be a bigger magnet. Finally. I don't know what was holding you in, but you were in there. Ugh. Let's get these backwards bearing caps off. And I'm doing this because I'm going to pry out on a differential and I don't want it tumbling out of here. So I'll just thread these in by a couple threads. And that's why I loosely threaded the bolts on. I'll be sure to try to get the shims and everything and take it over the bench. I wanted to get a closer look at that breather to see if it was clogged or whatever. So I'm just going into the top of the hole that's here, and I can see that it's not completely blocked off. I don't like blowing into it like that, but I do plan to clean the inside of this out. That does need to be replaced, or else there could be contamination from water and other sources, road debris. This pinion just feels chunky and unhappy. So it's probably good we're swapping out these bearings and everything. I believe this nut is 1 1/16 inches. Sorry, I forgot I didn't have them on. Oh, well. That's a lot looser than mine was. Pinion will come out now. And it's crushed sleeve, and there's a chunk of something in here. Wow. All right. We're learning all kinds of stuff. Here's an inspection for you, so you can see what we got. A whole lot of goop there. Let's get those pinion bearings and races out. This is an old input shaft that I've used for stuff like this for a long time. I know you're not supposed to beat on hard metal. You're not supposed to beat on hard metal. We are putting new ones in. I'm gonna knock the races out now. You can see the little indentations on either side. The same is true from this one coming from the other way. Got some distance on that one. Doesn't look great in there, on this side anyway. But I try to go in. Sometimes you'll get like a little bruise or something up here in the metal because it's soft. I try to feel with my finger, and if I feel any raised areas, I'll either go in and sand it down, or sometimes I'll just hit it with like a punch or something and flatten it out. But I'm not too happy about all these little things up in here. Hopefully the race sits in there properly, because we do have a leak here. You can see some of that bruising a little better over here. Just want to make sure that this is flat so the race sits in there flush. Before I get into the gears, I'm going to do what I can to make the housing ready, which means cleaning this gasket surface, just running a tap through these holes to try to get rid of some of the RTV and stuff that's left over inside there. I'm going to be using this plastic end here. It's cast iron, so it really doesn't matter, but I just like to use this one for gasket material. This is a 5/16 by 18 tap. I prefer to use a thread chaser, but I don't have one. I'm not trying to make threads here. I'm merely trying to get the goo out. And you can probably see there was a little bit of goo. So if you've ever questioned my use of gaskets instead of RTV for diff covers, you're looking at it right here. Just to give you an idea of the stuff that's coming out. For good measure, I'm also going to do these bolt holes down in here, because these in particular on this side didn't feel great. 7/16 by 14. I'm going to clean the housing, get all this junk out of here. Certainly don't love it, because I do see some nicks on this bearing cage, and on this one too. And there's RTV in there. Not sure how well you can see it. We'll see how good the zoom is, but see that right there? That is RTV right there. There it is. You can really see it there. Some of the damage that I was talking about to this bearing cage up here in this area. There was some of that on the other one as well. I don't find a chunk of RTV in this one though. Races, you know, look normally worn, I guess. I don't love it though. Okay, here's the pinion bearing, and there's our old friend RTV embedded into it. Here is the outer bearing. Feels a little chunky, a little sandy. This guy doesn't seem happy, especially being like literally filled with RTV. There's a lot of it down in there. So changing out these pinion bearings is certainly going to help things, I'm sure. To my relatively untrained eye, doesn't look horrible, but I don't know. RTV, guys, it's not necessarily your friend. It does have its applications, but I'm not so sure this is one of them. This day is flying by and time is getting short. So I'm gonna just move along with getting this stuff together, getting it up in the car, and we'll check it for noise. As far as details on assembling differentials, I'll post videos in the description. I've covered Chevy 10 volts, Ford 8.8s. So I will link those down in the description if you want details on this stuff, but I'll cover the highlights of what I'm doing here. Now I noticed that this was not just a pinion bearing set, which these are the pinion bearings up here, but also carrier bearings, so we're good. I'm going to take the opportunity to swap these carrier bearings out since I wasn't really confident in what I saw there. This seal that came with this kit apparently isn't correct. I need to use this seal. I believe I mentioned that before. We have a new crush sleeve here, so we should be all good to go, and a new nut for the pinion. So I believe we have everything we need to move forward and get this thing rebuilt and back up in the car. I'll probably start with putting these races back in, and then start working on the differential parts. I'm going to take the old pinion bearing off so that I can get the shim that's underneath it. And if I'm lucky, this bearing will be salvageable and I can use it as a setup bearing if it's the same type as the one going in, which I think the ones going in are a Timken set. I found that the majority of the bearings out there for differentials for Ford and Chevy are Timken or Koyo. These are Timken. That was awesome. That's what I was after right there. I've already cleaned the new pinion off with brake clean and compressed air. Here's the shim that I removed from the old pinion. I'm just going to measure its thickness now. It looks like this one comes in at 0.035 inches. I'll just put it on here. Now, I checked my stash of setup bearings and I don't have one. But this came off so well, the old Timken bearing, because you can't put a Timken bearing in a Koyo race, which right now there's Timken races inside the differential. So they have to be Timken bearings that you do your setup with, so you can't mix and match them. This is a Timken bearing. The new bearing is also a Timken bearing, exact same thing. So I'm going to take some time, hollow out the inside of this so that it slides on and off of this shaft easily so that I can use this as my new setup bearing. First I'm going to pick out this RTV though. I don't want that getting into any setup that I might have in the future. Come on, you don't belong here. There, that's gone. Taking some time, and now have a Timken setup bearing for this. So this bearing will slide on and off in case I need to change the pinion shim. It'll make it a lot easier. And the next time I have one of these bearings in a differential, I won't have to go through this. It took about a half an hour to get here. This is weird. So I checked this kit, and this is the other pinion bearing, the one that goes on this way. And as you can see, it only goes part way down. And it's a Koyo bearing, unlike, like I said, this bearing is a Timken, then they made this bearing a Koyo. Doesn't matter so long as the race and the bearing match up, you know. Anyway, so I went looking through my bag of bearings, setup bearings, because I also made a setup bearing for this side, and I have a Koyo bearing that I used on my 10-bolt GM, which happens to be the same Koyo part number. I checked them. So this one will slide on here and slide off easily, unlike this one, which is my brand new one, which I'm going to set aside until final assembly. New pinion, setup bearing, old crush sleeve. No need for a seal or anything. I do, however, need the hub. Ooh. It's like there's going to be a little more resistance getting this hub on this set as opposed to what it was before. Ow. I need to rethink this. Put my pinion holding flange on it. I'm going to be using this later anyway, so I'm just going to leave it fastened up. I want a little bit of resistance, but not a lot. But I can already feel that this bearing is not happy. All right, let's check the pinion depth. All right, viewers. For you, it's only been a couple of seconds, but for me, it's been a day because I had some challenges. Well, come to expect it here on Eric the Car Guy, don't we? Here on the bench is what I've been dealing with. On the bench here, I have 3 pinion gears. This is the one I took out of the car. This one is the one I was attempting to put in, and this is the one that just showed up this morning. Now, yesterday when I went to install the new gear, I was checking the measurements. I had a massive amount of clearance to take up. It was sitting way too low inside the axle housing, and I'm just scratching my head. In fact, it would have taken almost this entire stack of shims to make it work. I mean, that was definitely a head scratcher. I checked my measurements, everything, checked on social media, and then I laid it here on the bench and put the straight edge across, and I could see that there was a massive amount of difference between these two things. Now, I realize there are going to be differences in gear sizes because there are differences in gears. I think this one here on the left is a 373. What I'm putting in is a 411. But even so, that giant gap there is significant. Anyway, as you can see on the new gear, all the way over here on the right, that gear is pretty much the same as the one I took out. And I'm going to install that one now with this shim and check my pinion depth and see if everything's okay. But yeah, real head scratcher here. But know that there are 2 different gear sets or 2 different housings and 2 different setups for 12-bolt GM rear ends. I think that's what we're dealing with here. So unfortunately, he brought me the wrong gear. Well, we'll find out in a minute. Let's get this one in and see how it measures out as far as pinion depth. Probably saw me struggling a bit trying to get this on, and these are snug when they go on for the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with my heat gun and just heat this up a little bit before I try to install it, and maybe give it a couple of taps with a rubber mallet to get the nut started so I can get this down on there. Let's check that pinion depth. Looks like it comes out to 0.509. 3.375 minus 0.509 equals, so my pinion depth is 2.866. Forgot to check the pinion head to find out what the measurement's supposed to be. I'm going to do that now. Looks like this pinion head says 2.8694. Given that I'm at 2.866, I think that's close enough. With that finally dealt with, I'm going to change the ring gear. These are not left-hand threads. Now I'll install the new carrier bearings and install the new ring gear. I start by cutting a groove in the bearing, and then I'll come in and hit it with a chisel. This is hardened metal. It should snap and break out. Gotta watch it when you do this, because these parts, when they break, they can come flying off, and they're very sharp. I've gotten cut by them pretty badly before. There we go. I spent some time to clean everything up to get it ready for the press. All of these bolts, I just cleaned them. They're a little messed up on the ends that you can see like this. So I'm gonna have to run a die over each one of these. These are 3/8 by 24. Well, that took a while to do, but it's done, and they all threaded in and out nicely. I'm gonna take a little break and come back, and we'll install the ring gear and keep moving forward. Now let's get these two together. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it up and hopefully get like one or two of these started. I'm gonna use them as a guide. Note that I added a little bit of Loctite to each of the ring gear bolts before final installation. I've done this exact thing in the past with good results. What's gonna win in a fight between wood and metal? I'm pretty sure it's gonna be metal. Yep. That looks really good. Now let's go torque them down. Notice the familiar theme here with the wood blocks. It's the only thing actually making contact with the diff here. I'm gonna run these down hand tight and then torque them to 45 foot-pounds. That one's not happy. I'll have to track down one of these bolts, but for now I can get it up in there and check the gear tooth pattern and everything else and install this later. Passenger side's going in with all of its shims, while the driver's side gets its race. Not the shims yet. I'm just using the shims this thing came in the door with, if that's even possible. It took a little bit of time to get these shims correct. I started with the shims that the differential came in with originally and found those to be a bit too tight. So I started removing shims until I felt like I had what was an acceptable amount of preload. You do want some preload on these carrier bearings, but not so much that you really have to hammer in the shim pack. Once I felt I had an acceptable preload, I started swapping shims from side to side to get the backlash I wanted. Nope, needs less than that. But I like this preload, so I'm just gonna start moving shims from this side to this side, little bits at a time. But that's like 15 thousandths, that's too much. And we're back. Now, this is the tooth contact pattern that I have now. I don't know if I can show you the coast side there a little bit. Okay. Anyway, it looks a little far in, but that's okay because that is backlash. So to get this to move more towards the center, it's backlash. But my backlash right now is 0.009, which is banging spec. I don't want to increase it anymore. I'm actually very happy with this tooth pattern also. So I'm going to disassemble this, hopefully for the last time, press the pinion bearing on, and put it all together. I'm gonna recheck the pattern one last time before I button it up, but we're on the other side of getting this differential together, back on the road and checking to see if we still have that noise. FYI, in order to get my pinion depth adjusted where I wanted it, I kind of wanted a 39 thousandths shim, but everything is in 10 thousandths, so there's no oddball sizes. So I took the thicker one, and you might be able to see this, and I just lightly kissed it with my angle die grinder and a Rolock disc, and I came up with something a little bit smaller so that I could get, it was 36 when it was in there originally. I thought it was a little shallow on the pinion. So now I was able to get that 39 that I was looking for. So this was 40 thousandths when I started with it, and now it's 39 thousandths where I wanted it. So I took a bigger piece and made it a little bit smaller to get it in where I wanted it to be. And there, it's my new pinion bearing, freshly pressed on and shimmed. This process has been a little messy, so I'm just gonna go in and clean the inside of the housing one final time. And these rags that I'm using are specifically made so that they don't leave lint, or at least they don't leave as much lint as some of the other rags that I've used. I'm putting a little bit of gear oil on the pinion bearing before I install it. Not totally necessary. I mean, I'm gonna fill the differential housing up with fluid, but every little bit helps. I don't want to forget my new crush sleeve. The outer pinion bearing is such a snug fit on the pinion. It doesn't, well, it slides onto the old one nicely, but not so much the new one. So what I'm gonna do before I go to install this is I'm gonna put on a pair of gloves, and I'm gonna heat this up with my heat gun prior to installation, so that when I install it, hopefully it slides down a little bit easier so that I can get the pinion seal installed. It went on there too good. This is the old crush sleeve. It hits on there. You okay? Before you took a dive, I was able to get this down on there most of the way. I used the old sleeve and my rubber mallet to knock it back into place. Now I'll be able to install the pinion seal and the outer yoke. For this setup, I'm using this pinion seal because he has a different type of yoke on here. So I'm not using the seal that came with the kit. I am gonna take a little bit of grease though on the inside of this seal and just sort of wring the inside of it so as it's not installed completely dry. I use the heat gun and I use my FLIR camera to make sure that I had this thing nice and toasty before installing it, because I don't want to have to beat it in with the pinion seal in place. Excellent. I heated that up to about 200 degrees, FYI. And now I've got plenty of thread sticking out so I can draw it up the rest of the way. Still a little bit of play. I'll be installing a new washer and a new nut. Well, not the new washer. If not, I'll have to reuse the old one. I have gotten away from the method of going by the torque reading on this nut. What I do instead is I tighten it down till I feel some resistance, and then I measure the rotational force, which I'm looking for like 25-ish inch pounds of rotational force. This isn't quite there yet. I want to try and creep up on it. Because once you start tightening, you don't want to loosen on that crush sleeve. You want to keep the tension on it. It almost feels like I went too far. Oh, not as bad as I thought. In fact, it's about 24 inch pounds. It's a pinion flange holder. I'll link them down in the description. I got this one, but I kind of like my one from Bleep and Jeep better, which is the one I'll link, so it'll be slightly different than this. Now I can install my carrier assembly. Yes, I did get a new ring gear bolt. I installed it with a little bit of Loctite and torqued it to spec before final assembly. Putting that bearing cap in lessens the chance of this assembly falling out on me. All this stuff's linked in the description. I'm going to 60 foot-pounds on these cap bolts. I check my backlash again. It's actually a little better. That went from 9 down to just under 5. Hopefully the tooth pattern didn't change too much with because the setup bearing was the old bearing, and I know the old bearing was bad. Maybe the new bearings being in there, even though they were the same brand, maybe that's accounting for that difference. I find a fresh spot for a new tooth pattern. Now the pattern moved in towards the toe a little bit more, and that's to be expected. Whenever you decrease backlash, that's what'll happen. So if you got it too far in, you increase backlash and that moves out. I'm gonna count on that wearing in. I kind of wish it was a little farther down, but I think it's good enough for government work, as they say. I'm happy with the backlash on this. I'd rather have it tight than loose in this situation. I think we're ready to put these axles back in and put this new cover on, and then go out and check for our noise. I had trouble getting this one out. This is a brass drift punch. I like to put the bolt in as a guide as to where it's gonna end up. You know what? I'm just gonna run this out a little bit. Put a drop of Loctite on it. I cleaned it before I put the Loctite on it. We are painfully close to getting this thing back together and getting it out on a test drive. Here's the new Moser rear cover. It has these bearing supports. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a little bit of ultra black RTV, and I'm gonna put it around the base of this, and I'm gonna run it back through. That way I've just got a little bit of RTV on the threads. That way it'll draw it up in. I'm gonna back these about as far out as I can get them so that there's no way for them to come in contact with the caps during installation. I think that's backed in there far enough. All right, these are both ready to go. I'm gonna install it on the diff. Just an FYI here, this cover comes with 13 bolts, not 12, and the 13th is a little bit longer here, and that is for the brake line retainer in the back. You can put a spacer underneath it, and that extra length is there to take up for the spacer. I cleaned the mating surface before I'm going up on there. I'm using a gasket not RTV. Not a big fan of the RTV for this, but that's a personal preference, and I think we covered that at the beginning of the video. I like a gasket. Easier to clean up after, at least in my mind. And this, I believe, is what they're talking about with this brake line. So I've got to, let's put 2 of them in there. A couple of spacers to bring this out past the cover, and then extra long bolt. I'm gonna take one of his old spacers for this side. Make this work. This one also got a longer bolt from the old cover. These are gonna get torqued to 25 foot-pounds. I'm just snugging them up at the moment. That's on there. Now I'll run these down until I feel they make contact with the bearing caps. Right there. And they're like 5 foot-pounds maximum. You don't want to load the bearing cap. You just want to basically touch it, hold it. That's it. Don't push on it because you'll distort it. So I think actually, yeah, like right there is good. My torque wrench only goes down to 10 foot-pounds. This one's kind of snug. Yeah, as soon as it touches, just barely move it. The lock nuts get torqued down to 10 foot-pounds. Now let's fill it up. Here's something I'd like to mention. Here is the factory fill plug, and you can see its location. It's just below the axle tube. You come over here and you look at where the fill is, you can see that it's considerably higher than the axle tube. So I like to actually come in and take out the factory fill plug and fill through the other hole. It seems to fill easier, but this way I avoid overfilling the differential. If you like my trick, extension hose for the diff fluid fill. Now this royal purple has limited slip additives in it already, but if you have a limited slip and you may be using different fluid, make sure you put your limited slip fluid in it if it requires it. And by the way, if I was installing limited slip fluid into this differential, I would have put some fluid in out of one of the bottles, about half a bottle, poured the limited slip in the bottle, and then used the bottle to put the limited slip in. And that's it. That was a lot of work. I think it's time to take a picture. Well, more importantly, time to put the wheels back on and take it out for a drive. See if that noise is gone. Oh yeah, I suppose I'll have to reattach this drive shaft too. I don't know if it'll go down the road if I don't. No, I have not forgotten about my Rogue bearing cap. Couple of things real quick on this. I've already told the owner about that breather in the differential. Extremely important that that gets addressed, and he's going to get a new one and he's going to install it himself. Also, with a new set of gears like this, it's recommended you take it easy on them for the first 500 miles before you start getting on them. That way they get a chance to wear in, season up a little bit before you actually start flogging them, let's say. So for the first 500 miles, if you put a new gear set in, take it easy on it a little bit. Otherwise, just have fun, enjoy it. Hopefully it worked out for you like it did for me. Let's see if we got a noise now. everything, and it feels great. I think this car likes 411s. Doesn't make a noise, nothing. It is silent. Nailed it. It's a happy car. Yeah, it likes these 411s. All right, success. Get this 72 Nova back out on the road. I like it. I like it a lot. Oh yeah. Definitely. Smile factor. Smile factor of 11. LS Power 72 Nova. 411 gears. I like it. I like it a lot. All right. Well, viewers, that's going to wrap up today's episode. We're going to walk away with a win on this one. If you want specifics on rear end rebuilds, I'll link those videos down in the description that I've done in the past. Maybe we'll see this back in the shop again. Hey, if you have automotive questions not covered in this video, I ask that you head to ericthecarguy.com. That'll be linked in the description along with other stuff, tools, stuff that I've mentioned throughout the video. I want to thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. Try this at home, kids. Try it. Be a gearhead.